Welcome to Celebration Conversations. I'm your host, Sarah Taylor Young. Join me each week as I share inspirational conversations with fellow co-writers, artists, and friends. Here at Celebration Conversations, it is my hope that you will find motivation and celebration in your own story. Let's get to it. This week, I am with contemporary Christian husband and wife duo, Jason and Sara Todd. They are a married couple who has released their debut EP, the Christmas EP, on platforms such as Spotify, Apple Music, YouTube, and Amazon. Listen to their story of how they met and how God used an atheist to be a part of a bigger plan. Follow them on Instagram at Jason Sara Music. All right, today I am with Sara and Jason Todd, and we are talking about music ministry. They are a couple. You guys have a child, right? Little baby.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you guys just started doing some music business stuff together. Tell me about kind of how that came about.
Well, we've been together for several years, married for 3 years, and then it was pretty recently we just really felt God telling us like we need to take the next step. So we've written music together for years, we've done stuff together for years, but it was weighing on our heart differently this time. So before it was, we might share a song with our congregation or with friends, and that would be the end of it. But this time it just felt different. It was like it's time to do something with it. And it is a difficult thought for us because we don't really consider ourselves, even though we're musicians, we don't consider ourselves musical people. Like all of my friends who play guitar, I would consider them better than me at guitar. All of my friends who sing, I would say like, oh, they have way more confidence. And I know Sara can resonate with that on her instrumentation and singing. So for us, it was way more of like an obedience to God thing of, hey, we're going to do this with what we have. And, we don't have an expectation to be the next Chris Tomlin or Lauren Daigle or anything like that. We just want to do what we feel God is calling us towards. And if people get a blessing from it, that's awesome. And if they don't, that's okay. They can click on the next Spotify album or whatever.
Yeah, so true. That's very similar to how my journey started. I came into it out of just kind of obedience and like not knowing where it would take me. And it's just been a blessing ever since. So it'll be interesting and awesome to see what God has in store in this journey. So I'm excited for you guys. Tell me a little bit about how you guys met and a little bit about your journey.
Well, we met in college and actually in choir. So I guess we were always meant to do some sort of music together. But yeah, so we started there and we ended up connecting on theology because we come from very different backgrounds. So we just sparked our relationship and we just kind of grew in God together. And that's kind of where it just all began. And the rest is history, I guess.
So tell me a little bit about your backgrounds and how they're different.
So I grew up Presbyterian and very hymn singing church and very strict Presbyterian, I would say. It was a very godly home, and we had, family devotion time together and all of that. It was a very loving home. Then he came from, well, you tell your story a little bit.
Yeah, well, so I would have said I was an atheist for a lot of growing up. I was raised, however, so my family did have a Catholic background, but a term I like to use for it was we were Creaster Christians. So Christmas and Easter, we would go to Mass, but outside of that, it wasn't a real thing. So I was familiar with like the name of Jesus and the fact that he died for our sins, but I didn't believe it. In fact, up until high school, I was very adamant that he didn't exist, to the extent of like, I'm surprised some of my friends kept like preaching to me the way they did, because I would call them idiots. I would like, I just literally said like, okay, I kind of took on the whole flying spaghetti monster satire that went with it. And I was like, sure, yeah, God exists, whatever. But I didn't believe it at all. And then, of course, that changed radically my freshman year of high school. And then God worked on me and it changed again for the better my senior year of high school.
So did that kind of change through your relationship with Sara, or did that kind of come beforehand, before you met her?
A lot came beforehand. I would say my theological journey, though, and hers too, I would say. So like, we came from very different spectrums, even theologically. So very conservative, Calvinistic, 5-point Calvinism. And then I was over here like Arminian, and like, hey, you can pretty much do whatever you want in church as long as you do it for the glory of God. Like, there wasn't a lot of liturgy, very contemporary. And so like coming together, even in our first conversation, there's nothing more romantic than just a debate, because that's pretty much where we landed. I was like, oh, so what's your church background? And then I was like, oh, well, I disagree with you. And then she was like, well, I disagree with you. And then we kind of just fleshed that out. Now we're somewhere in the middle. Yeah. We've grown a lot together as that. But as far as like my atheist viewpoint, I'm very thankful that Sara has never met atheist Jason, because I was a different person.
So tell me a little bit about that journey and how you got to know God.
I was very much so a materialist. I felt that even morality was subjective. So like, sure, in your opinion, killing people might be bad, but in reality, like, it doesn't matter. We're just cells. It's like, there's no moral thing against it. We've just decided as a society that killing is bad. Like, that's kind of where I stood on things. It was like nothing really had a purpose. We were just here, and really we should just seek to be as happy as we can be because time is short, kind of thing. That's where I stood. And with that viewpoint, I mean, there's plenty in this world that for me was evidence of that. So, you know, like, I was raised by my aunt and uncle instead of my mom and dad. Like, there was some drug addiction issues and stuff like that with my biological parents. So I saw that as a thing to kind of use as a crutch to say, like, well, if there was a God, you know, like, he wouldn't have allowed that to happen. Things like that. So I even like justified it on an emotional level, my view. But luckily, I had friends that even throughout middle school, they were active in the church, and they were constantly telling me about Jesus, even though I would call them names afterwards. And
we probably would not have been friends back then.
Right. Yeah, like, some of the things that I said to them, like, I literally could not repeat here without like some hardcore censoring happening. So yeah, I was very anti-God almost, like, not even neutral in my atheism, but just like, if you believe God exists, there's something wrong with you. And then finally, because I was in trouble, I ended up going to a New Year's Eve church lock-in because it was the only thing I was allowed to go to.
Your punishment was going to church.
Right. Like, it was my selling point to my aunt. I was like, look, can I at least go to this? It's a church thing, right? You know, like, we're in a Catholic home, right? So church. And she was like, okay. But she even talked with the youth pastor and was like, are you sure that this is a lock-in? Like, he can't escape, kind of thing. And once all of that was figured out, I went to this youth event. And the thing that makes it very difficult to ever debate, you know, just by facts alone, that God exists is this. Like, I had a personal experience with God that night. I was convicted by the Holy Spirit, and he drew me in. Like, I don't know how else to describe it other than
wow.
It was his will for me to no longer be an atheist. And I did not go there planning on it. In fact,
you're probably planning against it.
Right. In fact, like, when the guy opened up the night with prayer, I was kind of like, oh, here we go, you know, like, in my mind. And then it was games until almost midnight. And then at 11 p.m. is when it was like, hey, we're going to meet in the youth room and we're going to have a time of worship and a sermon. And I was like, oh, they tricked me. Yeah, here I was having fun for like 3 hours because we started at 8, and now you're going to throw in a sermon and a worship set right before midnight? Come on. But it's funny how, you know, you can go into something. I mean, really, I would never compare myself to him as far as like what he's done, but like, Paul was on his way somewhere as Saul, and had something in mind. He was anti-Christian, like actively against the Christian movement, and God said no. And that's really how I would describe it in my life, was I was against God, and God was like, well, not anymore, buddy. And
wow, I've got chills. I gotta say, I've got chills and tearing up a little bit. That is just an incredible story. I mean, we can dispute all day long whether God exists or not.
Mhm.
But to me, it comes down to, I had a personal experience. You can't dispute that.
Right.
That it's just something that I feel like only God and Jesus can do. You just have a personal, I've had many experiences like that. So I know exactly what you're talking about. So yeah. So tell me about after that experience. Like, did people in the youth group start maybe talking to you or answering questions that you had?
Yeah. So I went to a smaller church for most of my high school career after that, but I think there was kind of a disconnect, and I can see this now because I'm in ministry and I help out with youth, and there's definitely kind of a disparity of, if you're not careful, you can fall into following the people who are dragged to church versus the people who are there intentionally. So it didn't take long for me to realize that this person who was in the youth group, who I admired just out of the sense of popularity, still went to parties on the weekend. He would be drinking alcohol in excess with his "Jesus is my homeboy" t-shirt on. And, like, in a way that can be misleading, because I was like, oh, so Jesus died for my sins, but I can still do whatever I want because now I'm covered by grace. So,
Right.
like, even though I had some friends who were pouring in to me in a different way, I kind of saw both sides and felt like, oh, I can be kind of apathetic towards this new transformation and then just keep living knowing that God is real and here. So it was like I believed, but I still wasn't like moving in faith, if that makes any sense. And then I had a friend who was one of my atheist friends that I still kept in contact with, and he and I started having a conversation, and he asked me tons of questions about faith, and my response was, I don't know, over and over. And then at the end he just said, like, well, you are a Christian, right? You should know some of these things if you claim to be a Christian. And I think that's where God had another moment with me and was like, I just used your atheist friend to convict you of not taking me seriously. You believe me, but you don't believe in me, if that makes any sense.
Mm-hmm.
And, scripture is clear that, like, the way you show your love for God is by obeying his commands. And I was just basking so much in the fact that he loved me that I didn't even consider genuinely loving him back. And I think that was the moment where it's like, yeah, if I say I'm a follower of Christ, I need to get off my butt and follow him. I just can't sit there with my binoculars and be like, wow, he's going, I have to actually
there he goes.
and follow. So.
Yeah. So what would you say to maybe I just have to say, I just see youth minister for you. I don't know if you are one or if you plan to be one someday, but that's just kind of what I see for you. It's what Spirit is telling me. So that's kind of cool. No pressure. What would you say? What would you say to maybe some youth ministers who have a kid coming in and they don't know God and they're just kind of nope, I'm just here for the pizza and for the good time. What would you say to them?
Let them keep coming, but I would say, don't cater to it. So I think a lot of times we can get in situations where it's like, okay, well, I know that half of the people who are here don't even want to be here. So I need to liven it up. I need to do something that will gain their full attention. But the truth is, the friends I had that were chasing and seeking God, at that point, they're kind of being diminished if you do that, because it's like, oh, well, I guess youth group is going to be more so about mainly games, and then we might talk about Jesus for 10 minutes. So I think, yes, have the games, have fun, because I mean, honestly, that's what got me there. If there wasn't a lock-in experience, I wouldn't have gone to the church. But I think what was so important about that night is, even at a lock-in, a New Year's Eve party, he was like, okay, from 11 to midnight, 1 hour, we are going to be praising Jesus. We're going to be in the Word. And I would just say, allow everyone to come in, but make sure that you are 100% focused on Christ and the things that you do. Because if you make it about trying to entertain and make that your primary goal, well, then you're just an event coordinator. Like, there's no point really in even adding the bit. But if you're going to say, hey, come in, and then you're going to answer honestly. So to answer your question, I'm currently in the role of worship/youth.
Okay.
So I do things. With COVID, it's been crazy. Our first official meeting is going to be this coming weekend. So it's been a while since we've met as a youth group in person because of COVID. But we actually have 2 people, and we're a smaller church. We're about a church of 50, and we have 6 or 7 in youth. And 2 of those 7 openly admit to not believing God. What's crazy though is, like, when we sit down and we have the tough conversations, I almost feel like they're the ones who are the most engaged. Like, the ones who are raised in the church was like, here we go, gospel again, like, but as soon as I'm done, like, they give pushback. They're like, wait, so are you saying? And then we can have that dialogue. So we still do games. A couple weeks ago, we did like a park event because it was outdoors, and we didn't talk about Jesus at all. It was like a, hey, get to know you, or like, hey, welcome, we're getting ready for youth again kind of thing. But I already know this weekend we're gonna dive into the Word of God, and we're gonna present challenging questions and things like that. And so that's really my advice, is just focus on the Word and pour into those who are seeking, more so than pouring all your time into, like, how can I make people seek? Because the seekers will come as long as you're giving them direction.
I think too, it's about creating an atmosphere that is worshipful. How do you try to go about that when you're planning and, for an upcoming Sunday or an event? What do you try to think about happening or not happening in your time?
So we always try to leave room for more prayer than necessary. Not that prayer isn't necessary in all things, but sometimes it's like, okay, at the last 5 minutes, we're going to pray. Well, we try to give ourselves like 20 minutes. And like, we're not always in prayer that whole time, but we'll sit there and we'll talk things out. I think a lot of times the worshipful experience aren't the things that we necessarily think, before we met, like, I was really big in like mood lighting and stuff like that. So like, if I want it to be a worshipful experience, we need, the perfect amount of reverb on the voice. We need, the lights dim, who knows, maybe some candles, like, you never know. But like, it was way more cosmetic than it was like, hey, we're going to give God time. I think that's kind of the essence of what we would consider a worshipful moment. Is like, we can make our plans and we can say we're going to talk about A, B, C. We can go through verse by verse a chapter in the Bible. But if we're not leaving room for God to do something, then we're kind of sacrificing the worshipful moment. We're saying, hey, we did this. What do you think? You Christian now? Like, that's not necessarily the best way to go. So really just leaving room for God to do stuff. And a lot of times what's interesting, similar to my testimony, is the non-believing youth almost instigate the worshipful moment because they bring up something, and then it makes another, like, it's one thing for me to bring up possibilities and say like, hey, this could happen. What do you think of this? And another thing for someone to say, well, this happened at school the other day, and how do I react to that? And that can start a conversation. It can lead us into prayer. It can lead us into just seeking answers from God. And I think that's the worship moment, right?
Yeah. So it's finding that balance of organization, but leaving room for God. And not being like controlled chaos. You don't want it to be distracting for some people who are like, what the heck is going on here? But you want to leave room for God to do his thing. So that's a tough balance to reach. So I could think I guess as ministers in ministry, we just need to be in prayer a lot. A friend of mine would say, get prayed up.
Definitely.
Yeah. So tell me about how you guys got started writing music together.
Before we met, I didn't really write music. I didn't really know anything about music. Jason basically taught me everything I know. Even he taught me how to sing harmony and everything. Before him, I only played violin, and I didn't know how to read music. I did everything by ear, and I pretended to read music. Which is actually how I got into the college. That's a stipend. For a stipend. I got into the college program and pretended to read the music.
Wow, that is hilarious.
So I ended up in a lot of music classes and a lot of music theory classes. I just really enjoyed it, and I loved learning. So that's kind of how I started learning about music. And because we were talking together and we were both in choir together and we both enjoyed music, we just it kind of came naturally, I think.
Yeah.
I mean, I asked him to help me with a few things for practicing for some of my musical classes where I didn't know anything about them. And he would come in and try to help me with it. And I think that kind of sparked more conversation. And so, yeah, that's kind of where it started. And I know for him, he had been writing long before me, but I didn't start writing until after we met. I did poetry. I was very much more into the lyrics of things, but I didn't know anything on the music end of things. And he was way more of the music end of things. And you were saying that you had more like shallow lyrics in the beginning, like when you first started. It was more so about the music for you and the feeling. And for me, it was all about the words and the depth of it. And so I think that was kind of a good combination, actually, for us to come together and for him to be really invested in the music end of things and wanting things to sound just right. And for me to look at the lyric end of it and be like, well, does this convey exactly what we're trying to say? Or does this evoke the right emotion for what we're trying to talk about in scripture? That's kind of where we started. I'm not sure when you started writing. How old were you?
Well, writing Christian songs, I would probably say like my junior year of high school.
Just writing in general. When did you kind of start getting into that creative writing?
So I guess technically then I would have to say like 6th grade, but I was going through some phases. So I was writing rap lyrics and things like that. I didn't have a lot of confidence in my singing voice back then, so I was like, well, I can rap. There's some people out there who can rap, and I could probably do that. So I did that, and it was like really easy to look up random beats online and just do it that way. So when she came into college, she really only knew how to play an instrument and didn't really sing. So like choir was new for her. Yeah, I was the other way. Yeah, like I never played an instrument until I got to college. My first class, one of the professors said like, hey, if you're here to be a worship minister, good luck if all you can do is sing, because they're going to look for someone who can, play an instrument or something like that when everyone else is out sick and it's just you. Yeah. And I was like, oh, okay. So the church I was attending at the time gave me a guitar, and the deal was learn how to play a song by Christmas. So I had like 4 months to get proficient with 4 chords. and
One chord per month.
That's right. So I just dove in. Like I literally played every day, and I knew I wanted to be able to sing and play guitar. And my roommate at the time was really good at guitar, but he struggled with singing while playing. And I was like, okay, so I need to like learn to play while singing. So the first song I ever learned how to play was Amazing Grace. Knocked out 3 chords by learning that one. And it was literally, I felt so bad for my roommate because he would teach me the chord. Like, so he taught me G, and I didn't just strum G. I would go, May, and then I would reposition, Amazing Grace. So it wasn't just hearing chords over and over, it was hearing me like sing Amazing Grace at like, I don't know, 1 beat per minute. Like 1 beat per minute. I mean, he dealt with it, but I learned how to play guitar and sing. So that's when I started writing actual music, I think, at that point, versus just kind of like thinking of hip hop lyrics in my head and jotting them down and stuff. Yeah. But I was like, oh, I have an instrument. Now I can make my own stuff. So.
Yeah. So I've been interested to ask you this. What is it like working with your spouse, co-writing with your spouse, doing things like that?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's fun.
Yeah, I enjoy
what do you
it.
think?
I mean, I enjoy it. I think it's fun to challenge each other, and he will come up to me sometimes with just music and be like, "Hey, what do you think we could do with this?" I mean, I remember when we were still in college, you came up to me with a lyric, or with not a lyric, but a song where all you had was instrumentation, and you said, we talked about what we could base it on, and then I went back to my dorm at the time and just started writing lyrics, and then we came together and we started, fleshing those out. Yeah, and so I think it's a lot of fun, but then to sit down now and actually write the lyrics together and write the music together is even more fun.
Yeah.
That sounds like the perfect marriage. Yeah. You're like, yeah. No, it sounds like a really, really good relationship for co-writing. Tell me a little bit about that. Like, what do you think it takes on both sides of the co-writing ends?
I think one is just realizing like whatever you come up with isn't, set in stone. And I mean, that was hard for me at first because actually one of the things we did, a few songs that I wrote lyrics to and melodies to, we went back because I was like, I don't know if I like the lyrics, but I really like the melody. And we were like, okay, well, let's go back into the Jason archive and make it Jason Sara.
Yeah.
And like at first, that was really hard for me because I was like, well, yeah, but I really like this lyric in that song. And she was like, well, thematically, that's got to go. and I was like, but the lyric. And so finding the common ground there and realizing like whatever you bring to the table is moldable. It's not stone.
But I also think that because I struggled with that too. If I wrote a verse and he wanted to change the verse because he doesn't think that it fits, or just even part of the verse, I'd be like, well, I wrote the verse, and having that little bit of a pride thing to it. But I also think when we actually work together, our end result is more glorifying, and also it's just so much better than we could do separately. When you actually let go of that control factor and let the other person come in and work on it with you. So, and he could have an idea and I just completely disagree with it. And then we kind of work through it, and the end result is different than I thought, and the end result's different than what he thought, but it's better together, really.
Yeah.
So tell me how you work out a difference. Like she's saying, no, it needs to be this word or this rhyme. And you're like, well, it doesn't fit my rhythm. Or, what do you guys do when you get into a disagreement about something?
Well, I mean, we usually just try to seek a compromise.
Right.
Like sometimes Sara loves unique words, like words that aren't used every day.
Okay.
And like, so sometimes a word can rhyme with the other word, but it just doesn't fit right. Like, it's like, okay, it rhymed, but it doesn't fit right.
It's not conversational enough.
Right.
Yeah. So I think a lot of our conversations when we're trying to like find that middle ground is like, it's like, well, I really like that word, and something you talked about before was just like, keep that word and put it in your repertoire for later, for a different song.
Right.
So there, like I have an iPhone full of melodies that have not been developed, and I need to go through them again and listen to them. And she has a notebook full of words. She's like, I love what this word means, and like what it, like how it can describe this emotion or this scripture or something like that. And she just has a notebook of words, and I have an iPhone of voice memos of melodies. And so sometimes it's literally just telling each other like, hey, why don't you put that word in your notebook? And Jason, why don't you keep that melody and come back to it another time?
We always end up working. So we'll put that word on pause for a little while, and we'll just kind of go through the song a few times without it and kind of try to find another something else that kind of fits it better than both of us. Because he'll come up with a word and I'll be like, yeah, but it doesn't evoke the right emotion, or it sounds flat, or it sounds cheesy, or same either way. Like, and so when we go through it, we'll just kind of, every time we go through the song, we'll sing a different word into it and see what kind of comes out of it. And we always end up finding something we both like.
Yeah, it sounds like what it takes, I think, in any co-writing situation is just a lot of genuine respect for the other writer, and neither one of you guys wanting to be right all the time. Like, you got to set aside your ego a little bit, and it's just kind of, it's about the song. It's not about who's better or more seasoned. It's just, what can we create together? Right. So yeah, it sounds like you guys have really got that down just by talking to you guys. It's just very sweet to see. Very sweet to see. Tell me a little bit about your upcoming EP.
It's going to be a 3-song EP, and it's going to be a Christmas EP, one of our favorite holidays. The other one being Easter. So kind of tossed up between those. I guess Easter's a little more good for us. But but yeah, so it's going to be a Christmas EP, 3 songs. We wanted to do 2 of them original, and then one of them more of a cover. So we're covering Come and Stand Amaze You People, which is not a very popular one, and that's kind of intentional. But the first time we heard it, it stuck with it. Like, it's become my favorite Christmas song, and I think the same for you, actually. So we both love that one a lot, and we were like, you know what, we should do it. So we put that one on the list, and then we have another one that's going to feel way more jazzy, kind of a Sinatra feel, just because we love that kind of music too. Literally, her birthday was 2 weeks ago now, right? Yeah, time flies. And we were like listening to old records and stuff and dancing in the living room. So we love that genre, and we were like, oh, maybe because I'm an okay guitarist, we can find other people who are like excellent at that genre to help us. So we've been collaborating with some people to bring that song to life. And then the last one's just a straight up worship tune, and we're gonna do it on ukulele, so it'll be fun.
Okay, very cool, very diverse. So where did the inspiration for these songs come from? Is there like a story behind any of them?
One of our songs, It Brings Me Home, is the name of it. The inspiration really was we wanted to write this nostalgic song. We just had this like desire in us to do that. I don't know why. A few years ago, and we sat down and we wrote it together, and then we sent it out to a family and friends as kind of a Christmas card. And at that year, we're a little low on money. we're like, well, this is our Christmas card to friends and family that, you know, hopefully will mean more than a card. But yeah, so that's kind of where that one
in fact started. Like, our goal was to not write a Christian song.
Yeah.
Like, when we went into it, we were like, well, I mean, like, writing Christian music, especially for me anyways, is like really stressful, because it's one thing to just write about, you know, what you're feeling in a moment, but then like if you're writing a song that's portraying who Christ is, you're like, I don't want to mess that up at all, you know. So I'm way more burdened, I think, with writing Christian music. We both are. So we're like, let's just write a fun Christmas song that doesn't, you know, like a no pressure Christmas song. And we started talking about the nostalgia, and then sure enough, like, this seems to happen every time. It ends up being something in between. Like, we can't seem to write a song without Jesus or God being in it. And obviously it's a Christmas song, so we want to put Jesus in Christmas. So verse 1 plays way more on the nostalgia, and then verse 2, while there's still some nostalgic elements to it, it's just talking about who Christ is, and that we get to sing his name and sing of a love who came for us.
Yeah. So when is that coming out?
Our goal is early December. We have most of it recorded. We're just finalizing some things, and then a gentleman named Todd Johnson, who's going to mix and master for us, so we'll send that to him. But our goal is December 1, but we won't know that until the masters are ready. So
yeah,
either way, early December.
Very cool. Well, we'll have to check that out. So we can follow you on Instagram. Where's your Instagram name again?
Jason Sara Music.
Jason Sara, no H, right?
No
H.
No H. Well, it was so great to have you guys on and get to know you guys a little better. I'm excited for your music to come out. Tell me, do you see your little girl being a part of this thing you've got going on with your music?
One day, hopefully. Like she's already in love with instruments. She has a few toys she walks around with. She loves her jingle bells. Actually, this is top secret. One of the things I want to try to do, it's top secret, so I'm saying it on a podcast.
On a
so
podcast.
But I would like to record Jane, our daughter, playing with her jingle bells and use that as like a background percussion in one of our songs.
Oh.
I just think that would be great. So the thing is, she gets super excited when she's shaking them. So it's usually not just the jingle bells. You also hear like a at the same time. So we'll see if we can get her to do that. But I think that would be a fun addition to the album and say like, hey, our 1.5-year-old daughter is on here too.
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about what it's like having a child and then trying to be a musician on top of that.
It's a little bit of a challenge, honestly. I didn't expect it to be as big of a challenge as it is, just mainly because of time. You want to spend time with your family, and then he has a job he goes to during the day, and so balancing work along with family time and also finding those times of quiet to be able to record or to write music together. It's actually a big challenge for us. That's probably our biggest challenge, really, is trying to balance that. We end up working a lot of the time at night. In fact, last night he was recording and it was like through the night. He didn't want to sacrifice any family time. He didn't want to sacrifice any work time. So he went through the night recording. So really that is it's a challenge. We're trying to find room for it. And so the biggest thing that I think we do for each other is schedule it. It really helps just scheduling that time out and being like, no, we set aside this time to do this. And so we should do this. So that's the biggest, I think.
Yeah, I'm finding, I haven't gotten it figured out yet either. It's still kind of like an ever evolving thing. But what I've found is, doing a lot of things at night when babies are asleep, what you can. I don't think you can, have a drum set going on in the recording studio when they're trying to sleep or whatever, but just blocking out that time and just really being intentional about, okay, what are my priorities? And I've recently started doing that, and it's made a world of a difference. Like in the mornings, okay, I have my family time, get everybody to where they need to go, off to school, work, whatever. And then I have my time at home. I work at home when nobody else is here. And in the afternoons, I have time with my daughter. So it's just about being intentional, I think. And it's always going to be a balancing act, no matter what you do. So yeah, it's good that you guys are finding that ahead of time. So it's important. Well, thank you so much for being on. I'll let you guys know definitely when this airs. So thank you so much for being on. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's been a blast.
Hey there. Don't go just yet. I have a special sneak peek of Jason and Sara's single, Brings Me Home, from their Christmas EP, The Christmas EP. Make sure to follow them on Instagram at Jason Sara Music. While you're there, go ahead and find and follow me at S Young Music. Show us some support by liking and sharing to inspire followers and your friends alike. Here is Brings Me Home by Jason and Sara Todd.
Lights bright, winding round the tree. The presents glow beneath, Sinatra crooning out sweet melodies. Can't help but tap your feet. The smell of hot cocoa tickles your nose. Around those you love most, lovers gather near. The mist mistletoe for a chance to just be close. I hear bells ringing and I want